Thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Speman, and I'm the Director of Haven at Massachusetts General Hospital. I'm here today to testify about my experiences working with domestic violence survivors, not on behalf of MGH or Partners, although Partners Healthcare as well as MGH has signed off on these recommendations. I've been at Haven for 7 years, the first 3 years as an advocate and the past 4 years as a director. Haven provides counseling, advocacy, and accompaniment for domestic violence survivors. I also spent 4 years running groups for survivors that emerged. I've been in the DV field for over 12 years, and I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. In my experience working with domestic violence survivors, they rarely have the opportunity to stop and think about what documentation might be needed when they are fleeing an unsafe situation. We see people who come in after a physical assault, and they often don't have the time or space to consider anything other than getting safe and receiving medical attention. The guidance to homeless coordinators assumes that DV survivors have access to the resources that would provide documentation, and this assumption is faulty in my experience. Many of the survivors with whom I have worked have not accessed the resources required to provide documentation for various reasons, including language barriers, as she mentioned, fear of retribution from the abuser, fear of deportation, fear of losing their children, the list goes on. Abusers are very skilled and creative when it comes to making threats about what will happen to the victim if she reaches out for help. Another challenge a survivor might face in getting the necessary documentation could be me, as a domestic violence advocate. Many of us are very conservative about providing detailed written documentation regarding the specifics of the abuse, particularly in the healthcare setting, where we're bound both by HIPAA as well as DV privacy laws. Many of us do not give out written detailed accounts of survivors tell us. To give you an example. A couple weeks ago, a young woman and her young daughter showed up at the hospital asking for help for a safe place to go. Her husband had been repeatedly assaulting her, and he finally left for work that day, giving her the opportunity to pack herself and her daughter up and get to Mass General Hospital for help. I explored her options, and she expressed an interest in getting a restraining order, but said she wanted to get someplace safe before pursuing that. No domestic violence shelters were available that day, which is quite common, particularly in the past year. So I suggested she go to DHCD for emergency housing, and she agreed. I provided her with a standard letter, but not giving too much detail, as we've been advised by our legal advisors. Later on that afternoon, the homeless coordinator called me saying the client was not eligible because she didn't have the proper documentation. And I explained that I had given the client a letter, and that the client also had a police report from 10 months ago. I was told that the client needed a detailed written documentation that DV had occurred within the past 10 days. Clearly, this woman did not have that kind of documentation. I was not able to provide a more detailed letter because of our internal policies, but I did confirm verbally that what she had disclosed to me was DV in the past week. She also didn't have a restraining orders documentation because she had made the smart decision to get someplace safe first. Thankfully, I was able to give the information verbally, and that seemed enough to secure emergency housing for this young woman. I wonder what would have happened to them had she not come to MGH